Jesse Blake Sports Report with Jesse Blake.
So I'm watching the Jays play the San Francisco Giants on Thursday afternoon, and I assume you might have been watching as well if you're listening or watching this right now. And it ended up good for the Jays. They won 5-3, which is excellent. And Spencer Horwitz hit a ball that bounced a couple times and landed in McCovey's Cove, which is awesome to see. The bullpen held it together enough to get the victory. The bats came alive enough to get the victory, and all of that is awesome. The Blue Jays are now 4-2 on their West Coast road trip, which is a little too little, a little too late to climb all the way up the standings where they need to be climbing to get out of this hole that they dug themselves into. So it's like awesome, they won, but it's like it's a little. You need a miracle at this point, and this isn't the middle of the miracle or anything like that. But they got 3 games left in this West Coast road trip, and then we hit the All-Star break, and all of that being said, it was an awkward time watching the game today because in the middle of the game, the broadcast reported it. It came up on everybody's phone. If you follow Jays news, Kevin Kiermaier, the reason we are here to talk today, was placed on waivers by the Jays. And it happened in the middle of the game. And it's awkward because Kiermaier made a really good grab in center field. And then moments later, they're like, oh yeah, this guy's on waivers and he's playing for the Jays. And baseball is funny in that it has a lot of funny rules and it has a lot of quirks to it. And this is another part of baseball that's a quirky. You know, they have a thing called revocable waivers, which means that it's literally what it means. It's revocable. You can place somebody on waivers, and if another team puts a claim on them, you can revoke that player and you can just say, no, we want to keep them. So today, it might have happened before today, but the report came out today by Joel Sherman of the New York Post that Kevin Kiermaier is indeed on revocable waivers for the Toronto Blue Jays. And we got to look into, first of all, why Kevin Kiermaier himself deserves to be on revocable waivers, why the Blue Jays are doing this from a team money standpoint, and what this means for them going into the deadline and moving forward. So let's talk about Kevin Kiermaier himself first. Fantastic defensively. There's nothing you can say wrong about Kevin Kiermaier's play in center field. And Blue Jays Nation had this little blurb in their blog today that I think perfectly illustrates just how good Kevin Kiermaier has been. They wrote, despite his offensive woes this season, he continues to remain incredibly effective in the outfield, posting 7 outs above average, a number that is in the 95th percentile, according to Baseball Savant. 7 outs above average in the outfield is awesome. That is fantastic. So why does Kiermaier deserve to be on waivers? Well, his offensive abilities this season have been negative a million. It has been absolutely awful. Right now, Kevin Kiermaier is hitting, his batting average is $183. His on-base percentage is .232. His slugging is .290. That's a .522 OPS. And he has only 3 homers on the year, even though he's not a big home run hitter, but 3 homers on the year, 13 RBIs. It has been a terrible offensive year for Kiermaier, and he signed a $10.5 million contract this past offseason, only for 1 season. So that's why he is expendable at this point, because at the end of this, he'll be a UFA, and he's most likely not going to be back with the Jays in 2025. So they need to recoup some assets for him. And this is especially important because the second point of this is why are they doing this from a team perspective? One, it's that you got to recoup assets for somebody who's going to be a free agent and the team's struggling. You're not winning. Having Kiermaier doesn't help you at this point because you're not going to get into the playoffs having him or not having him. It doesn't make a difference. So you need to recoup some assets for him. Plus, there is this little wrinkle that's very important. Baseball doesn't have a salary cap, but it has a luxury tax. $237 million is the luxury tax threshold. And every year, that threshold, your team is either under or above that threshold. That's calculated on July 30th. The Jays right now are about $10 million in salary away from being under that threshold. And it's important to be under that threshold come July 30th when you don't have any incentive to be over it. Because if you are above that multiple years in a row, there are certain taxes you have to pay for your salary. That is the luxury tax cap. If you are under it and you're not a repeat offender, it's a lot cheaper for you to operate your baseball team. If you are over it for multiple years, it's a lot more expensive to run your team. So the Jays right now can get under the luxury tax threshold by July 30th so that if, say, next year they're above it, they won't be a repeat offender being above the luxury tax. So they can be under it this year and then go above it next year. And then they can say, oh, we're only above it for one season instead of two. So we have to pay less in luxury tax because there's luxury tax penalties the more years you are above the luxury tax. I hope that all made sense. I tried my best, people. I tried my best. So with that being said, the $10 million they're trying to shed. They're trying to shed to get under that luxury tax because it's important for them and Rogers to save some money. And Kevin Kiermaier, if you were to go to another team today, they'd save about $4 million off of his salary because it's all prorated, right? He signed a $10.5 million contract for a 1 year in the offseason. So there's about 6.5 has expired right now, and there's about 4 million left. To get to the whole thing that they're doing here, they put Kevin Kiermaier on revocable waivers in the hopes that somebody wants him and they will simply can just give him up so that they save the money, or somebody wants him and then they can work out a deal with that team where maybe they retain some of the salary, but they still can get some assets back. Plus, they lose whatever rest of the salary that the other team takes on. And all of this comes down to the Jays need to start selling and selling fast before the trade deadline hits at the end of July, all of the assets that won't be useful to them for the rest of this season because they are not a contender and they have expiring deals. Yusei Kikuchi, who we've talked about before, is a prime example. Here, there's somebody who's going to be UFA at the end of the year. Even if you wanted Yusei Kikuchi for 2025, you would sell him now and then just try and sign him in the offseason. And it's not useful for the Jays to hang on to players that they might not have for next season. This is a lost season. And in your lost season, it's important for management, for Atkins and Shapiro to recognize that it's lost and they need to move assets and get ready for 2025. That is the goal. You have to win in 2025. It is unacceptable for this team not to be a contender next year. There's no realm of the possibility that they can be in a rebuild, a long rebuild. They don't have the prospects to do a rebuild now. They'd be starting from literally nothing. The prospect system is so bare right now that it needs to be about retooling for the next few months of the season and coming back in 2025 as a contender with these new pieces and assets that you've managed to acquire. Move away from guys who might not come back and that you're going to be able to re-sign in the offseason. Move them away for pieces that will help you next season. That's the task of management right now. And this Kevin Kiermaier situation is just one small move into that whole plan of getting good for next year. And this is going to be a very eventful 3 weeks for the Jays. A lot of guys are going out the door. You're going to hear this a lot more about people on waivers. So we're going to keep up with all of that action, and hopefully the Jays can get good by next season. That's what we're looking at right now. 2024 is unfortunately a giant write-off at this point. So write off your assets and gain better assets, right? That seems like a good plan. That's it. That's it for me tonight. I will see you again very shortly. Please subscribe to the Jesse Blake Sports Report YouTube channel. I appreciate every subscription I get. Hit like on the video if you like it. Give this podcast 5 stars on your favorite podcast app. I will see you very soon. Good night from Toronto.
And that is how it's done.
The Jesse Blake Sports Report with Jesse Blake.
Jesse Blake, the guy that likes to hear his name twice in one sentence. Sure, I know him. No, he doesn't have an ego at all.